So we'll start with bravery, because it sounds like you've had to be brave an awful lot in your life. But can you pinpoint one moment that you think is your bravest out of all those things that have happened?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, I think, looking sort of objectively, I've probably been quite brave throughout this illness. I've had a lot of surgeries and, um, I lived off literally drinking 4 drinks a day for 2.5 years. And that in itself is just very difficult. I was physically very unwell and malnourished, but also mentally, and psychologically, it's a really hard thing to get to grips with. Um, but I think probably one of the bravest decisions that I've ever made, with the most wide impacting ramifications, is ending, a 16-year marriage and sort of walking away from all that I'd built and all that I'd like hoped for and dreamed for. I left the family home. I, gave that to my ex-husband because I didn't want the drama and the stress, and I knew that, his financial status was in a more of a difficult position than mine. So I left, yeah. I left the family home, I left the marriage, I left my hometown. I moved to a new village, not far away, but had to start again. And I think that after sort of going through the whole trajectory of what you thought life was going to be, making that decision was probably the bravest decision I made, because I made it for me, and I made it about, I really started looking at my sort of self-care, my happiness, what I wanted to achieve in life. Whereas historically, I'd always put other people first, family, kids, um, the sort of the whole like the unity of, hosting the dinners and the everything was always about other people. And I made a brave decision, I think, to put myself first. Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably the bravest decision, because it had a huge impact on a lot of other people's lives as well as my own.
Yeah, it definitely is brave putting yourself first. I mean, I'm a recovering people pleaser, as I like to call myself, and it does take a lot of bravery to do that. So, would you say that your illness then was the catalyst then for that decision, in terms of thinking, I, I've got to do something different now because I've been presented with this lot? I mean, a lot of people do that, don't they? They get and think, oh my God, everything isn't settled. It's not what I thought it's going to be. So I have to do something different now, or I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life.
Probably I made that decision was not necessarily based on my illness, but it was based on someone else's illness. So I had my own symptoms then, but I hadn't gotten to a point where it was sort of life changingly difficult at that point. But it was actually when my best friend's mum was in hospital. She was in a hospice actually, and she was dying of a really difficult stage 4 cancer. I went into the hospice to read her some poetry, and I literally had this kind of like epiphany when I came out. So I knew it was the last time I was going to see her. I was trying to like sort of make her smile and laugh and read her poetry and give her some like familiarity. Um, and then I left, and I literally sort of came outside and I walked along the road and I thought, is this is this life? Does it get to this point where you're lying in a bed, dying of, she was dying of, of a horrible disease that had taken everything away from her. And I thought, this just can't be it. And then I suddenly started having this existential, am I happy? This kind of, is this what I want in life? It was really strange. And I think that's when, excuse me, I'm awfully sorry. That's when I made that fundamental decision that things were going to change. And I really questioned, my marriage, relationships, circumstances, experiences, everything was after her being um, very ill and seeing her die. And then as I went through that process myself, I think my illness and, the challenges and the changes I'd faced kept then bringing me back to that question all the time. Am I truly happy? Is this truly in my, interests for my own well-being? And I very much frame most of the choices and decisions I make now using that lens. Is this ultimately going to be good for me, for my well-being, for my wellness? And then sort of by default, it'll be good for everyone else around me.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic approach, I think. And I think, yeah, I've had something similar. My sister was ill with cancer and is okay at the moment. But I was very much like, I don't want to have a bucket list when someone says you've got, 2 months to live. I want to live now, which is part of the reason why I started doing my comedy, even though it was much later in life. So I think that is a brilliant attitude. And I think if you can keep bringing yourself back to that, it really does probably make you make the best decisions possible for your life, really, and for everyone around you, as you say, because if you're happy at your absolute core, then everybody else gets the benefit of that, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, it's really difficult. You can't be positive all of the time, and life happens. And especially with like sort of chronic illness and symptom management and procedures and surgeries and everything you've got to go through, it is really difficult. But I do keep always trying to bring myself back to that, because if you can find the light and if you can find a bit of hope, then yeah, I think that positive mindset, you can rewire your brain. We all know about neuroscience now and neuroplasticity, and how if you think something differently, it can actually really change the sort of like nature of your body at like a cellular level. Even, there's examples of people healing major traumas, major illnesses in their body purely from positive mindset, positive thoughts, and I don't know if that's scientifically, you know, accepted in the research community, but there are examples of it. So I think, well, why not? Why not try and choose wellness? Why not try and choose happiness? Why not try and choose positivity instead of choosing to be, negative, or, you know, to feel that sort of pain and suffering? Because you could easily be that if you're suffering from illness.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, as you've said, with chronic illness as well, the issue is that nobody sees it, or a lot of people don't see it.
Yeah.
So it's almost invisible. Because, as you say, to the outside, you don't look like someone who's suffering from chronic illness, but then you're fighting those daily battles all the time. So that must be really important to keep that mindset, because people perhaps expect a lot from you when perhaps you haven't got a lot to give on some days. I presume.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that one of the big things that I've learned is about that invisibility or visibility, because it just proves, doesn't it, that you don't know what people are going through. You absolutely, you have no idea if that person is struggling with, a horrific divorce, or relationship issues, or they've just suffered a major bereavement, or they're, taking certain medicines 5 times a day, or they can't swallow food, but you just don't know. And I think I've really, I suppose, come to try and have some faith in that shared humanity around, we are all going through a really tough and challenging life is hard. I think, when we're younger, you think of this like the romantic notion that life is generally good, and it gets, punctuated by sort of times of challenge. But when you really look at life, it's bloody hard. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of challenges, and it's really tough. And actually, I try and now frame it with, well, if you accept a baseline that life is pretty challenging, how can you punctuate it with more joy, with more fun, with more laughter, with more, living in the moment, all of those things? Because we're absolutely not guaranteed that tomorrow is going to come. I know that now from, personal tragedy in life, and also from having really chronic illness, where I genuinely thought at one point, I was facing, death. My body was shutting down. I couldn't. I hadn't eaten for so long. My menstruation stopped. I'd shed all my body mass and my muscle. I was like a really depleted in terms of energy and physical capability. And yeah, I think that now it's all about, well, be in the present moment, and live for now, and do as much as you possibly can to enjoy what you're doing right now, in this moment, because that's all that's guaranteed.
Absolutely. And I think I've found, certainly with this year, it's been personally challenging for me, that the highest of highs come generally with the lowest of lows. And you can't eradicate those lows. So as you say, you've just got to kind of ride ride that wave as best you can, and bring as much joy as you can into your life.
I think that's the point that I want to help women with is it's about navigating the journey, because the highs and lows will be there anyway. It's how you navigate, how you cope with, how you deal with, what tools you can use to maintain your internal compass of balance, even if you're being tossed about on this stormy sea. It's about trying to find a place where you can at least seek some comfort and sort of refuge from the storm, and often that's within yourself, I think.
Yeah. So we've got our baseline bravery. Is there anything that you feel you're going to have to be brave going forward? Because I know you've got a book coming out, haven't you? Or you've written your book. When's the plan to publish that? Do you think that's going to take a bit of bravery to get it over the line and get out there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think being vulnerable in itself is quite brave. And I will admit that for quite a few years, I very much hid behind a mask of um, I'm the doer, the fixer, the maker, the sorter out of problems, that, everything's okay. And I did hide behind, I didn't really tell people how much the illness was affecting me, affecting my daily life. And not just the physical bits, because people could see that, but the psychological impact and the emotional impact of it. So I think vulnerability in itself, and sort of like that admission that you're not okay, or that you're not, running on full cylinders, or that you're not this super amazing being, that you kind of put this face onto the world, stripping back all those layers and saying, I'm human, and, I can sort of, be broken just as much as other people, and I can be lost just as much as other people. Whereas historically, I probably wouldn't have ever done that. So I think there does take some bravery in being vulnerable. But also, I want to get the message out about living with invisible illness. So I think that my book is going to be my sort of way of doing that, so that other women can learn from lessons that I've gone through myself, and will already have had someone who's experienced that, because it's quite difficult to find information about someone who's gone through the ups and downs of chronic illness, someone in their 30s. A lot of sort of medical information out there, or research, is, especially around, for me, around swallowing issues, and the technical term dysphagia, is sort of like after stroke, or after disability, or after a big accident, or maybe later on in life as well. It's, at the sort of older people. I found it difficult to find something that I could relate with. So I'm hoping that by offering this book to the world, it's going to sort of, someone can look at that and go, oh wow, these challenges, other people have faced them, and they've gotten through them, and they've managed to sort of find a sort of toolbox of coping mechanisms. And really, that's what my book's going to be about, is not only my journey, but using that journey to then help others with the lessons.
Yeah, and I think, as you touched on before, it's about hope, isn't it? Giving somebody else hope, that who might be in that sort of pit of despair, that, whether they're newly diagnosed or they feel very isolated, of going, even if you can find one person who is thriving despite it, it gives you something to hang on to, doesn't it?
Absolutely.